Step one of the process is what we call gesture. Gesture is where you essentially determine the action of the character. Figure out his proportions, what he's doing, if he's running, jumping, throwing a ball, what have you. In this case, we're going to start with Hank. Hank is standing, drinking a beer, just as he would in the alley. Now we draw the head. The head is going to ultimately be the determiner for the proportions. Hank is 5 heads tall. Now if you look very closely under the drawing, you may see a slight image of Hank. That's what we call the model sheet. The model sheet is the drawing that we use as a reference for what Hank is supposed to look like. It's what Korea uses when they animate it, it's what we use when we draw it. And whenever possible, we enlarge or reduce the model sheet to the proportions that we need to the size that we're working with, and we work directly off of it. Now once step 1 is done, which we've just about done here, we move on to step 2. Step 2 is basically construction. It's where we add basic shapes to the gesture to give the character form. In this case, we start with Hank. We start with his torso. His stomach is very round. He has a beer gut going. His upper body is sort of egg-shaped. He comes out looking like an eggplant or a squash. His head is very cylindrical. And then what I like to do is I like to find a center point for the face, shows which direction he's looking at, then a center point for his chest, that shows what direction he's facing. Hank's belly button would be right about there. Then we go on to the shoulders. Shoulders are balls, just like in real life. The arms pivot from them, so I like to make them balls. Add the shoulders coming off the neck just as a straight line, and then I start adding the arms directly down from the pivoting ball. There's the break there between the forearm and the upper arm. And I just slightly indicate Hank's hand holding the beer can. And you usually want to put a line where the knuckles are going to go. Then we start putting in the legs. The legs are basically just 2 cylinders right on top of each other. Hank wears jeans. We don't usually draw his legs underneath. We just sort of draw the jeans. I like to put in and indicate where the knees are. And we indicate his feet. The balls of his feet are round in the front. There's Hank's chin. And that's basically step 2. Step 3. Detail. It's where we decide which lines we're going to keep, which lines we're going to get rid of. It's where we also put in details like Hank's sleeve. We darken up the lines that we're going to keep, the contour lines that are going to define Hank's form. There's his shoulder, his sleeve, his other sleeve, his chest, his stomach. These are the lines that we darken up. Sometimes you can go in and erase the construction lines, but if you darken the lines you're going to keep enough, then the other animators that are going to be working off this will know which lines to keep. We indicate Hank's other arm. And Hank wears a watch on his left arm, so we always put a watch there, which I will do here in a moment. We determine where Hank's belt buckle is by finding the center line and drawing it right under it. Hank's center line for his chest. Hank tucks his shirt in, so we put a couple folds in to indicate that his shirt is tucked into his pants. Give it a little depth, a little realism. Then we indicate his belt by following essentially the same line as the bottom of his stomach. Then a couple of belt loops there, there, and there. Hank has pockets. Bottom of his pants kind of come up over his shoe a little bit. I like to put a little fold in the back of his knee just so you can see where it bends. It's just ever so slight. Then onto his shoes. Hank wears sort of a hiking boot. Kind of finish those off a little bit. Put a little bit of tread on the bottom. And then shoelaces. Very simply formed shoelaces, just little lines right across the top of his shoe. Now we indicate Hank's watch on his left arm. There's his thumb, his forefinger. That's his hand just resting to the side. Sharpen up his forearm a little bit. Then we come in and actually draw the fingers around the beer can, clutching the beer can. the top of the can. Cold, refreshing Alamo beer. Indicate his collar. And the next step, we need to draw the face. The first thing we do is we start putting facial expressions in, facial features. The ear, there's the line of the eyes. We determine where the nose is going to go. Right about there. And then about halfway between that and the chin is the mouth. Hank has these little cheekbones that we sort of indicate that run about even with the bottom of his nose. The side of his face, he has the very pronounced brow, a cheekbone that juts out in sort of a sharp fashion. Right there. And it cuts at a slight angle to go in for his neck. Hank has a fairly fat neck. Put in his jawline. I like to indicate where the side of his hair stops and the front of his hair starts. There's just a little bit of line there, and I do the same with the face. So that we know where the front of his face is and where the side of his face ends. Indicate his ear there. And I work on his hairline a little bit. Define his hair a little bit better. There's the bottom. We're going to add little ridges later for detail to indicate that it's actually hair, but this shape works fine for now. Now Hank wears glasses. It makes him a little bit easier to draw. It gives his face a frame, basically. It also helps to determine when he's looking up, looking down. You can draw the glasses at different angles, and it sells the perspective of his pose a little bit better. Draw the little earpiece there. I start out by drawing them as one wide block across his face. Then I separate them into individual lenses. Put the centerpiece across the middle. Now his glasses are squared across the top at the corners and rounded across the bottom. Then I start indicating the nose. Just sweep down off of the glasses. Sharpen up the top of the glasses a little bit. You see how they're rounded across the bottom, square across the top. Now Hank has little worry lines across the top of his head. They're great for facial expression. If Hank is worried or sad, they're going to be pointing up. If he's angry, they're going to be pointing down. So we can do different things with his forehead brows lines, his forehead lines, to indicate his mood. They're a very helpful tool. Now we start indicating his hair. Just a little folds, almost like the folds on his shirt. Just to kind of indicate that there's hair there. Little spikes on the top. Hank keeps his hair pretty short, so it kind of spikes. And then rounded across the back. Now we go in and add a little bit more detail to his nose. There are very few shortcuts you can take with these characters. The only trick is really to learn. His inside nostril lines up pretty well with the inside of his glasses. And then the interior shape of his nose is just sort of an S shape. It's the nostril, and then it curves up to form the center. And that's basically it. You sharpen up his cheekbones a little bit, which is two little kind of smile shapes. Then his chin. Now the thing about the chin, if Hank's mouth is open, the chin will be lower. If it's closed, it'll be a little bit higher. So it moves up and down with his mouth. Something that we need to be aware of when we're drawing the characters. Put in Hank's mouth. I'm going to make him smiling. He doesn't smile nearly enough. Now the mouths in the show are very similar to real people's mouths. They have that little divot in the middle, kind of cursive shaped. Then just an indication of a lower lip. Sharpen up a few details here. Now Hank's eyes. I usually start out with just 2 egg shapes to indicate where they are. Hank's eyes have a very interesting shape. They're straight across the top and they curve up in the middle. Even when he's not worried. It always makes him a little bit worried. But that's just his, what we call his neutral pose, his neutral expression. So just lines right across the top that curve up slightly in the middle. And then 2 lines that come off the inside and outside, straight down at angles away from each other, and a curved line across the bottom. He has these little eyelid lines across the top. Sometimes you see Hank's eyebrows, sometimes you don't. Depends on the mood he's in. And we put in his pupils. Pupils on this show are round. They're sort of moon-shaped crescent. They're round with a highlight in the middle, but they're just open-ended. They're like circles that you've taken a section out of the side of. Gives them a little bit of depth and dimension. It helps you to show which direction they're looking in. You just tighten up a few of the details. At this step, you would go in, you would check it against the model, decide what needs to be changed, if something needs to be shortened or lengthened or widened or what have you. And then any darker construction lines you would go in and erase so that they don't get confused. And that's basically it.